We start tonight with a massive, stunning development that should have Hillary Clinton very worried tonight. The Daily Beast reporting the Department of Justice has, in fact, reopened the investigation into Clinton's server scandal. Now, according to that report, investigators are now gathering information about how Clinton and her top aides handled classified information, including questions about how much classified information passed through her unsecure server, who put the information onto the server, which investigators knew about all this, and when did they know about this? Also breaking tonight, John Solomon, who will join us from the Hill, reporting that the FBI has also opened a brand new investigation as it relates to the Clinton Foundation, and they are trying to determine whether or not any pay-for-play occurred while Hillary Clinton was serving as Secretary of State. We have been saying, and I've been saying on this program, 2018 will be the year that all of these scandals boomerang back on the left, the media, the Democratic Party, and tonight it's all beginning to unfold. Now, for example, take tonight's new information about the Clinton server scandal and couple that with the DOJ now looking into the Uranium One scandal. And we're also learning that the DOJ will give House investigators access to all of the documents and all of the witnesses in the Russia investigation and the dossier investigation. Now, all this means, all this information about the Clinton bought and paid for Russian propaganda, that fake news salacious dossier, the Russian dossier, will finally now see the light of day. You got to buckle up. It's going to get very interesting. Now, also tonight, we'll get back to that in a minute. Look, if you don't work or live inside the mainstream media and their giant, well, incestuous, almost like bubble, well, then you might have seen that the economy under President Trump is on an absolute tear. This is good news for forgotten men and women in this country. Take a look at these numbers. Dow Jones now soared today to over 25,000, its highest number ever. The job market continues to boom. ADP reporting today 250,000 new jobs created in December alone, which is the most in 9 months for that survey. And take a look at this headline. Job cut announcements in 2017 see the lowest level since 1990, Challenger report says. And here's another headline. Manufacturing in the U.S. just accelerated to its best year since 2004. And earlier today, the president is moving to now open up offshore drilling. That's right, off the coast, both coasts, and in the Gulf, which is vital to America becoming energy independent, the lifeblood of our economy. And that's just only some of the good news from this week alone. Unemployment, a 17-year low, 4.1%. Under President Trump, before the 250,000 jobs, 1.7 million jobs were created. That's now 2 million jobs. African-American unemployment in America is now at a 17-year low. Food stamp use is at a 7-year low. 2 million fewer people using food stamps now under President Trump in 1 year. Home prices are up 6%. The Trump administration has now taken a chainsaw to burdensome regulation from our government. And for every new one they created, in terms of regulation, 16 have been slashed and cut away. There's GDP so far. We have seen 2 quarters of over 3% growth. And remember, Barack Obama, the only president in the history of this country to never reach 3% GDP growth for an entire year. Now, here's what the media will never tell you. Well, there's a night and day difference between the economy just a year ago and now under Donald Trump for 1 year. And under Obama's economy, I'll remind you, it was god-awful. Lowest labor participation rate since the 70s. 95 million Americans out of the labor force. The worst economic recovery since the 40s. The lowest home ownership rate in 51 years. 13 million more Americans on food stamps. 8 million more in poverty. 43 million total living in poverty under Obama in just 1 year. The economy is now turning around, and that's before the $1.5 trillion historic tax cut even had a chance to take effect. All good news for us. And liberals, the media, they said, oh, the tax cuts are going to be terrible for the economy. It's only going to benefit corporations. By the way, corporations don't pay taxes. Turns out to be a big fat lie. They pass the cost on to us. Companies like, look, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank, Southwest Airlines, and others, American Airlines, Fifth Third Bank, even Comcast, the parent company of Conspiracy TV, MSNBC. Wow. Because of the tax cut, they're giving their employees $1,000 bonuses and pay raises. Other companies have said they will invest now billions back into the U.S. economy, build factories and manufacturing centers and hire new employees. Not to mention, you, the American people, will soon start to see money in your paychecks where it belongs. It's all because of what? This tax bill that the media said was god-awful. It just shows you how clueless and how the media lies to you daily and, frankly, how much they hate President Trump. They have this Trump-hating obsession, which I told you about last night, which means that they will do and say anything to try and hurt him on a daily basis. Let me tell you how it works, because I told you all about CNN. He actually called him a demented liar. And then Conspiracy TV, NBC, has to say, no, that's not enough. He's not only demented, he's deranged and a pathological liar. And they talk to each other. What we have now is a media so corrupt, they're all a bunch of sheep, they're brain dead, they're hypnotized, and it's like watching a horror movie unfold before our eyes. Remember, only days ago, the media wanted you to believe we were on the verge of nuclear war with North Korea. Well, why is that? Because unlike his predecessors, President Trump refused to be an appeaser and capitulate to the threats of Kim Jong-un and North Korea. Watch the media's hysterical coverage as they lie to you.
President essentially daring the leader of nuclear-armed North Korea tonight to prove that his button works. This is our world now.
16 tweets today to start the new year, some of them deeply disturbing. These are the messages from a person who is not well, from a leader who is not fit for office.
Trump needs to be medicated and hospitalized at this point, or he is going to just kill all of us.
His recent tweet about North Korea and the nuclear button, the size of the nuclear button that has raised alarm bells, not just from Democrats, but from Republicans as well.
Now, that frenzied display was 2 days ago from the media. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders slapped down the press for attacking the president. Good for her. Let's watch this.
Should Americans be concerned about the president's mental fitness, that he appears to be speaking so lightly about threats regarding the nuclear button?
I think the president and the people of this country should be concerned about the mental fitness of the leader of North Korea. He's made repeated threats. He's tested missiles time and time again for years. And this is a president who's not going to cower down and is not going to be weak and is going to make sure that he does what he's promised to do, and that's stand up and protect the American people.
Understand, 48 hours ago, your media was losing their minds and predicting, potential nuclear fallout. Well, that was, of course, until Steve Bannon's comments about the president surfaced. Then the narrative magically shifts away and changes, and the world is going to end at any minute, and then they find a new best friend. That's right. Oh, let's see, a guy they've hated forever. They have uncontrollable glee that Steve Bannon, a guy that they hate, said something about the president. It just shows you how pathetic all of these people are. Now, look at how breathlessly they are covering the Bannon story. Did they ever tell you a single thing about the economy that's good? Anything that Trump's done good? If the dog bites, the bee stings. If you're feeling sad in the media's world, it's all Donald Trump's fault. Watch this.
New revelations from a soon-to-be published book are rocking the Trump administration tonight, portraying President Donald Trump as a volatile and uncontrollable force within the White House.
President Trump issued a statement like no presidential statement ever before in American history, lambasting his former campaign and White House senior strategist Steve Bannon in no uncertain terms.
Now it seems Bannon has turned on his old boss. Bannon on the record saying things implicating him in the Russia probe and that suggests Trump's oldest son and son-in-law committed treason.
You now have Steve Bannon, a guy that they all would have had their arms around and had their thumbs up taking pictures 2 days ago. Now Steve Bannon is talking about treason.
And that bombshell book rocking the White House, Michael Wolff's Fire and Fury Inside the Trump White House. It features blistering attacks on the president and his family from Steve Bannon, the strategist by Trump's side during the campaign and the early days in the White House. It has drawn a furious response from President Trump.
This is how bad it is. Look at the graphic from CNN fake news Jake Tapper and what he used earlier today to talk about the new Michael Wolff book. Mental fitness? Really? Now, in a way, I feel sorry for fake news Jake. He has to take his marching orders from his Trump-hating, soon-to-be scandal-plagued boss, Jeff Zucker, who's best friends with Matt Lauer. The media could barely control themselves over the Bannon story, and you can bet they will drag this out as long as possible until the next crisis they create comes along. And if it's nuclear war coming, 2 days later, they'll forget about it. Here's the thing when it comes to the media in this country. Their biased, abusive attacks against this president are unprecedented. But you know what? In a way, they've always shown their liberal bias. The media has been an extension of the Democratic Party for decades. Here's the proof. They have a long history of breathless, hysterical reporting, but only when conservatives or Republicans are occupying the White House. The media's also bent over backwards to praise the presidents they so love, adore, and worship, like Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, people that appease murdering dictators and despots. Now, let's start with President Ronald Reagan. This is where our history lesson begins tonight. Back in 1984, you might remember, it was a microphone check. He was doing a weekly radio address that, he's going to destroy Russia with nukes. He was joking. Keep in mind, this was never in the actual real speech. Listen to this.
My fellow Americans, I'm pleased to tell you today that I've signed legislation that will outlaw Russia forever. We begin bombing in 5 minutes.
Okay. Of course, the audio was released. The media tried to make it into a huge, massive international crisis, even though it was a joke. Take a look back then how NBC News reacted.
It was the joke heard around the world, the one by President Reagan about bombing the Soviet Union, and it resulted in a Soviet red alert, and it became a campaign issue in this country.
By August 14th, the story became world news, a major item on Moscow television where the joke was not treated as a laughing matter.
And look at this headline from the New York Times, Reagan's gaffe. And it only gets worse from there. The media couldn't stand the fact Ronald Reagan ended up, by being strong, defeating the Soviet Union, and he didn't fire a single shot. And that started when Ronald Reagan called the communist regime what it really was, an evil empire. Take a look.
They preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth. They are the focus of evil in the modern world. So in your discussions of the nuclear freeze proposals, I urge you to beware the temptation of pride, the temptation of blithely declaring yourselves above it all and label both sides equally at fault, to ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, to simply call the arms race a giant misunderstanding, and thereby remove yourself from the struggle between right and wrong and good and evil.
Oh, he didn't give them billions of dollars. President Reagan was confronting evil in his time. But then it was way too much for the media, the liberal media, to handle, since they prefer the policies of, let's see, bowing and kissing rings and appeasement. Here's a quote from the New York Times describing Reagan's speech, quote, "In the long run, however, the greater danger lies in Mr. Reagan's vision of the superpower relationship as good versus evil and his near proclamation of holy war against an evil empire." Well, it turns out the so-called paper record, just like the rest of the liberal media, was completely wrong. If Reagan followed the media's advice, the Soviet Union, who knows, might still be standing. Next, remember George W. Bush. He labeled, rightly so, Iran, Iraq, and North Korea the axis of evil. You may remember this.
North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
How do you describe in the last century alone, let's see, over 100 million human souls destroyed? Is that not evil? Here are some of the headlines after George W. Bush's speech immediately thereafter. Response to terror has Bush overstated North Korean threat? Question mark. Allies hear sour note and axis of evil chorus. And even years later, the media is still attacking Bush's speech. Take a look at these examples from the Media Research Center.
Up until that moment, Iran was cooperating with the United States on the border of Afghanistan. It was post 9/11. Iran was more or less an American ally. By being included in the axis of evil, it turned the Iranian government in a completely different direction. It was a turning point in American politics and in foreign policy.
When Kim's father, Kim Il-sung, feared the U.S. would use nuclear weapons against his country. That historic fear was reinforced 50 years later when the U.S. labeled North Korea part of an axis of evil with Iran and Iraq. Kim Jong-il feared he would always be next after Iraq.
The media eviscerated President Bush, but he was right. Now just take a look at Iran and North Korea today. Bush was able to see back then that they needed to be confronted head on. And as for the media, well, they can't stand the kind of tough and direct acknowledgement that America does have enemies, that there is evil in our time. And apparently they would rather their presidents bending down and kissing the rings and bowing and kissing the feet of murdering dictators. Let's go back to the early 1990s. Bill Clinton sucked up, groveling to Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, and giving North Korea billions in energy subsidies, allowing North Korea to keep their nuclear fuel rods, and then goes on TV and tells you this is a great deal for the American people. What a lie that was. Take a look.
This is a good deal for the United States. North Korea will freeze and then dismantle its nuclear program. South Korea and our other allies will be better protected. The entire world will be safer as we slow the spread of nuclear weapons. South Korea, with support from Japan and other nations, will bear most of the cost of providing North Korea with fuel to make up for the nuclear energy it is losing. And they will pay for an alternative power system for North Korea that will allow them to produce electricity while making it much harder for them to produce nuclear weapons. The United States and international inspectors will carefully monitor North Korea to make sure it keeps its commitments. Only as it does so will North Korea fully join the community of nations.
Today we know his bribery or attempted bribery of dictatorship failed. Now, despite the obvious flaws back then with the deal with North Korea, the media praised Bill Clinton's efforts. They loved him. Watch this.
Deal that could end the long-running crisis with North Korea over nuclear weapons. It could also ease tensions on the Korean Peninsula and open the way for normal relations between the U.S. and one of the world's last old-line, hard-line communist states.
Beyond the details, North Korea seems to have made a fundamental decision that the Cold War is really over.
Crucial inspections are being delayed 5 years while the rest of the deal is implemented. American officials say the delay is a small price to pay for getting North Korea to shut down its entire nuclear program.
You know, you would think the media would learn from history, learn the lessons of history, but they didn't, because they're all a bunch of brain-dead sheep with an agenda. Back in 2015, just like President Clinton, we had President Obama proudly announcing a nuclear deal, $150 billion to the mullahs of Iran, threatening to blow us and wipe us off the face of the earth along with Israel. Watch this.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not. A comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon. This deal demonstrates that American diplomacy can bring about real and meaningful change. Change that makes our country and the world safer and more secure. This deal is also in line with a tradition of American leadership.
Total BS. Total stupidity. And what Obama forgot to mention, he gave the radical mullahs that are saying and chanting death to America in Iran, he gave them $150 billion of your dollars, plane loads of cash and other currencies. And Tehran, they're still allowed to keep and spin their centrifuges, which puts them on the path towards building a nuclear weapon once the deal runs out, just like North Korea. The media, they didn't care about any of this. They were quick to heap praise on Obama, the Peace Prize winner.
The U.S. and world powers reaching a major agreement with Iran, blocking one of our biggest rivals from developing a nuclear weapon.
The president is about to deliver a statement on this historic nuclear deal reached with Iran overnight. This agreement is supposed to freeze that country's pursuit of a nuclear weapon.
Has the U.S. and its allies successfully blocked Iran from making a nuclear bomb, at least for now?
But tonight, the United States could be entering a new era in its relationship with Iran.
I think it begins to change the dynamics of a tense relationship of 36 years between Washington and Tehran. I think the deal provides more than the United States anticipated, and I think it could help prevent an arms race in the region that would be detrimental to not just the Middle East, but to the whole world.
That's tonight's Hannity history lesson. It personifies your media in this country for who they are. They are afraid of strong leaders that dare to confront evil in our time. They are people that love capitulation and appeasement, even though it fails every single time. If you really want to know how the media wants a president to behave on the world stage, then take a look at this picture. Take a look right there. Oh, yeah. So what does our history lesson prove? The media has been and will continue to be mindless, liberal, left-wing, radical ideologues that no longer report the truth. They might only like President Trump if he sucked up to what? Radical mullahs in Iran and kissed Kim Jong-un's ring? Is that what they, and give them billions? Guess what? That's not something this president will do.